Hello, JD. You can all hear me, yeah? Everybody can hear each other?
Okay.
Brilliant. Apologies about that slight glitch there, folks. I hope people haven't sort of abandoned, but we're back live now to chat about what we were intending to chat about. Basically, the ongoing, what I would call the Paddy last agenda in Ireland, the sort of anti-Irish woke agenda that's going on, and we'll touch a wee bit about the Sweden and Italy elections. But I'll start off just by, there was a thing this week in Drogheda or in Donegal about Ukrainian people being just given houses over and above people who from Ireland who have been on the waiting list. And I'll see, can I share this wee clip? Hopefully you can see this.
Brand new houses there.
You see that?
Yeah, I see that, yep.
So this is in Milford, County
Nice big
Donegal.
plan. Well, they're not big Lexus Jeep, Mercedes.
So the plantation of Ireland continues, and at the same time, the National Indoor Arena in Blanchardstown is now full of 200 refugees, mainly from Georgia, which is a safe country, and their ambassador said that nobody from Georgia should be applying for political asylum anywhere, and secondly, from men from Somalia who have.
So, I mean, I'll cut that one. That's Herman Kelly, the leader of the Irish Freedom Party. He's making a very good point there about people from Somalia coming in and people from Ukraine who are jumping the queue, basically, over and above people from here. I mean, again, I don't want to be bashing Ukrainian people who are genuine refugees, but there's widespread abuse of it going on.
And you can see the effects of that on the recent elections in Sweden and in Italy, which has led to an increase in support of parties from the right.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll get on to that shortly, but just wanted to touch on that. I mean, Joshua, you're from the north yourself. Has there been have you come across any feedback about that, the thing specifically in the Donegal area?
Well, I was speaking to someone a few days ago. I was getting my hair cut, and she was saying that there were Ukrainians in one of the hair barbers in a town, and they refused to pay, but the police were called and stuff, and then they paid, and then they wrung out a wallet full of money. And then they're in these apartments too in a town, and they're walking up the street at 1 o'clock in the morning giggling.
Go on. You've gone silent there, Joshua.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I think the sound just cut out there at the end of that.
Yeah, so basically they're walking up and down a street at like 1 o'clock in the morning, like giggling and talking to themselves and stuff.
Yeah.
That's what the person told me whenever I was speaking to.
So I think what Joshua is just leading into there is that there is these instances are happening, and it's leading to an increase in anti-immigrant sentiment, which you can see reflected in. I mean, you talk to the average person on the street now, and everyone has a story now about some situation where immigrants, whether they're asylum seekers or legal immigrants, and has led to a lot more negative sentiment out there.
Yes.
I did a little bit of reading on this subject today, and I put together a few notes, if that's okay, Cathal, if I read on it. So, just in relation to, anti-immigrant sentiment leading to success or leading to the so-called rise of the far right, we can see recently there the elections in Italy and in Sweden. And one interesting author on social media, I won't mention any names, is wondering where is the far right in Ireland, or what has happened to the far right, or why don't we have one?
Yeah.
Some good interesting theories around that, and I think it's linked to a lot of sympathy, or up until this point, or previously, we're going to see things changing fairly soon, but there has been a lot of sympathy towards immigrants and immigration in Ireland because of the Irish people's own history and links with immigration. But that's going to be eroded. I mean, you can see Josh's example there of what's happening in his locality there. What we see, recent, high-profile crimes happening there in Tullamore, Kilbeggan, earlier on in the year, or
Yeah.
I should say the cases have been coming to court earlier on in the year. We can see instances there in up in Longford, a schoolgirl being assaulted. So all of these things now are getting more and more attention,
Yeah.
and it seems at a high level in government, there's no appetite to do anything about this.
No, even with all the levels, the numbers that are coming in, there's got to be more. There has to be an agenda to this. I mean, it does. The word plantation does jump out at you. You know, and Ireland knows all about that. You know, we've taken in more per capita than any other country in Europe, bar Poland, and that gives rise to all sorts of problems. You're seeing people going on the buses saying they're Ukrainian, so they get that free, and but that's okay if like we had the resource for it. Well,
Yeah.
massive housing problem, and you know there is anger now being reported about the fact that it is Paddy last. They can't get on the housing. The locals can't get on the housing lists, and they're being shoved down the pecking order and everything.
This is a symptom of the social liberal extremism that we're experiencing in Ireland at the moment, and I think that's, if you look at the swing from left to right and back again over history, we have an upswing and a rise of the far left, and that's what's led to this issue, and which will lead to an increase in violent attack on women, an increase in erosion of our national identity, and that's if it goes unchecked, it's going to have serious harmful effects. Look at how bad things had to get in Sweden for the people in Sweden to decide we need a change. How bad?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, a lot of people talk about Ireland, if certain parties get into government the next election, things are just going to get even worse, and then eventually. But how bad do you think things are really going to get in Ireland? They're bad.
I think we're going to get as bad as England. Like, look at London. All parts suburbs now are becoming under Sharia law now.
Yeah.
There's reports of no-go areas in Longford town.
Yeah, there's reports of that. Yeah.
Welcome.
In ways, Joshua, I think we're not far behind London. I think in sort of ways we are actually worse than England. So I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think so.
You don't?
I mean, I don't think we're as bad as London yet, but we're going that way, though.
Maybe not as bad as London, but in terms of the UK as a whole, I think the numbers are actually as bad, if not worse.
Yeah.
What about you, Shane? I mean, it's shudder to think how bad things may get, and of course, there's no talk yet of any cap on.
Well, that's it. It's only going to head in one direction, which is an increase in numbers of non-nationals moving here. I mean, if you were to look at the package that's on offer and the welfare that's on offer, Ireland is a great place to live.
If you're
there's no doubt about it. The living standards here, the living standards here are much better than in many of the countries that are the origin countries for the immigrants and the asylum seekers. There's no doubt about it. So if that's not capped, there's no doubt. If you leave a tap running, it's going to run. Someone has to. Yeah.
I'll go back to the analogy I drew a couple of streams ago about the football disaster in Hillsborough, where the football ground was full and the police and whatever just kept bringing more and more people in, and look, with disastrous consequences.
That's it.
This is just, and then
I think it's important. I think as well is that the blame for this is not at the feet of the immigrants who are looking for a better life for themselves. That is it's human nature. It's the irresponsible governance of the whole thing. There's
totally irresponsible. Totally irresponsible.
Absolutely, it's going to be destructive, and it's, as I mentioned before, it's liberal extremism just gone crazy, and that's because there's been a serious upswing from the far left. If you think about it, in response to the oppression of the LGBT community by the church, they're still on their upswing from that. The Repeal the 8 movement, all these movements have built momentum, and they're heading in one direction. It's more liberal social extremism, and it's unchecked, and it's going to lead to destruction of this country.
I mean, I do think that the people are slowly waking up. They're just not buying this now. I mean, slowly but surely. But I mean, are you getting any evidence of that amongst the normies out there, that people are just sort of saying, "Look, this is just ridiculous. What's going on?"
Well, that's it. I mean, you see
destroying the towns now are becoming majority non-Irish all over the place. People are saying, take small town Donegal, Lisdoonvarna, I keep mentioning, they're now majority non-local. I mean, what is that all about?
And what you have as well is that the media are complicit in it, the mainstream media, in the agenda, because a lot of them have been funded by the left, and are carrying this left agenda. So they won't cover anything that could be considered to be
Yeah.
critical of minorities. They're terrified to be critical of minorities because they lose their support. So,
But in terms of numbers, I mean, the Irish will eventually become just a minority in the country. They become probably the largest minority. Like
Sure, there's a 2005 Irish
Yeah,
Times article saying that Irish could become a minority by 2050. Did you see that?
yeah, I would agree with that. That's the way it's heading. That's the way it's heading. But I mean, just in terms of the numbers of Ukrainians, if there's 50,000 Ukrainians in Ireland, say a population of 6 million, that means almost 1 in 100 people in Ireland is a Ukrainian. And if it's going to continue on and on, that's a very big number of people overnight. You know, I mean, even the Polish community is not much more than that. That's over quite a period of time. It's just breakneck. It's breakneck speed. What's going on now? Again, I'm not trying to hammer Ukraine and the terrible situation that's going on there, but there's no alternative narrative. Take Roger Waters out of Pink Floyd. He tried to say, is there not another narrative we can talk about? He said, we're prolonging this war, we're arming Ukraine. That's what's driving this energy crisis. Why can't we sit down and talk some sort of resolution to the thing? They're going to have to do it eventually.
Well, that's it. As long as there's money to be made, you see, that's the problem. This war will continue, and there's too many big corporate vested interests here going to make a lot of money from supplying weapons, replacing weapons. You know, they make money from war, and that's what's driving this. You know.
Yeah.
You see, this is part of the New World Order plan that they want to destroy every economy on the earth so they can create their one world economy and their one world government. This is what this war is all about. I mean, they want the economy to be destroyed. I mean, if they didn't want the economy to be destroyed, they would have not put sanctions on Russia.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. There certainly it does seem to be an agenda behind it. There's no agenda. There's no desire or momentum to try and stop it anytime soon. I mean, even if you weren't along the lines of patriotic thinking, you would get that impression from early doors in it. You know, anybody that mentions it's shut down and cancelled. And I saw that thing there earlier on about go back to the anti-Irishness in Ireland at the minute. There was an Irish nurse, did not want to put somebody's name, the Irish version of the name.
I saw that,
yeah, on the sheet in the documentation in the hotel in the hospital because it would be difficult for foreign people to understand. That's ridiculous. That's all Irish about face. They should be, if you come into Ireland, don't come to Ireland then. You want to come to Ireland, people are going to have Irish names. You know, it's when in Rome, you treat it as the Romans do. I mean, we have a culture and a language and tradition. We have to maintain that. Otherwise, we're not. What are we? What do you think, Joshua?
I mean, I agree with that. So people normally use the argument, oh, the Irish immigrated to multiple countries in history. Well, back then there was no social welfare and they didn't get free housing, free vehicles, whereas most immigrants do now when they come into Ireland. So the argument that all the Irish immigrated to, that's not really a valid argument.
No.
And I'd like to talk about, to the idea that if you criticize that or question that you're a racist, then it's nothing to do with race. It's got to do with if you have a group of people and they're putting their shoulder to the grindstone, working the shovel, whatever it is, and some guy comes along and he stands there with his hand out, looking for a handout, and he's not going to, work for. If you've built something and you've worked for it, and some other guy comes along and he wants to just take a free ride, that's going to get under your skin. It doesn't matter what color the person is. That's
and the whole thing about the Ukrainian people, they're white people. They're not black or whatever.
Exactly.
Anyway,
so this leftist argument that it's about race, it's not, and that's all they have to throw at you. I mean, I think I made a comment recently on Twitter, and I was called a racist bigot and a Nazi. You know, and it had nothing to do with the argument because that's all they have to try and shut you down, and that's it. Another element that's out there. It's very sinister and it's a very repetitive element.
It's to try and shut you down and bully you, yeah.
Exactly.
But people they do get away with some sort of bullying, but I do think that a lot of the normies out there are beginning to wake up. So people are more confident.
That's it. I mean,
speaking
everyone
freely.
I've spoken to recently who previously wouldn't have had an interest in politics have a negative example of some negative impact immigration has had. Whether it's I mean, I know a lady now. She applied for a job with a company in Dublin. She was qualified for the job. and I know that a Ukrainian got the job, unqualified Ukrainian, for
Yeah.
probably half the salary. Now, I'm not going to say any names because it'll identify them or it'll identify the company.
Yeah.
But that's absolutely ridiculous. And if I know about that case, how many cases are out there? You know, and that's nuts. And that's only going to create more anti-immigrant sentiment. You know, and it's not the fault of the immigrant.
Yeah.
It's the government policies.
That's right. You can't blame the immigrants for doing it. I mean, it's the government that's facilitating them and doing it. But when they're giving houses or handing houses over, that means people aren't refugees. When people are having houses handed to them, that means they're here for the long haul. Well, that's not a temporary thing.
Exactly, and they won't have earned it, and they won't feel any kind of connection to the land or the, you know, the country. They'll and what's going to happen is the neighbour across the road is going to, you know, not like that. There'll be aggression. There'll be there'll be violence. But there has been violence in Mullingar. There was a young fella, 14, Ukrainian. He was attacked by a bunch of other Eastern European kids and Irish kids because of the anti-immigrant sentiment that's been created. So we're going to see more of that, and then we're going to see attacks from the other side.
Yeah.
So the question is, how many violent attacks against immigrants and Irish people and women does it take to change a government? That's the answer that we're going to find out. Unfortunately, that's what it's going to take.
About the racist label, I wouldn't be afraid of that for 1 second because it's a false argument, and I suppose, you know, I was banned off Twitter for highlighting the violence that is happening against white people. So the war is actually against white people too, because white people are being treated like second-class citizens, and there are non-white people who are against, you know, the violence and discrimination against, you know, white people. So we should also be supporting them too, that are not going along with the Marxist cult.
But when you talk about that, Joshua, it brings us on very nicely to what's happened recently in Sweden with the Sweden Democrats and in Italy with our friend who got elected there. Her name escapes me just.
Georgia
Maloney, yeah. Brilliant news. It was the best news I'd heard in a long time. Of course, the left's having an absolute meltdown about it. I mean, they're all called the BBC. They said the phrase far right about 15 times in about 5 minutes.
Yeah. Well, I have a theory about that. They can't actually use the term right because it's synonymous with correct. So they have to tag on far right.
Yeah.
You've got the left, you've got the far right, which is no.
You have to get your binoculars out to see it. They're so far out in the right there, you know.
Yeah, but that's it. They can't use that term because it might be mistaken for the word correct. That's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's right. It's right for a reason, but it is a good. It just shows that people have had enough in Sweden.
That's it. And then you look at the violent attacks that happened against women in Italy leading up to this. Yeah, which is it's crazy. And Sweden. I mean, I think the joke was for a while people were renaming it Swedistan because of the sheer numbers of immigrants up there. You know, and
but it's called Dublinistan, and London's Londonistan. You know.
Yeah.
But I mean, I just it's like a skittle effect. I mean, we're 2 years out from an election. You know, you're seeing it now happening in certain countries, and the EU, von der Leyen says, if Italy's prepared to go this way, we have tools to deal with this. You know, I mean, who's the Hitler here? Who's the Nazi here? You know.
Well, that's it. You know, a country will decide for themselves based on popular vote. You know what the best way for themselves are. You know, and how dare another country, another leader criticize that?
Yeah,
that's just wrong. You know, and people need to start seeing that.
Yeah.
And if we voted right in the next election, and are we in the, you know, what's von der Leyen going to say about that? He's going to start criticizing us, probably because it's not in line with it.
We'll probably be the last ones to move.
Yeah,
we have about 2 years to sort of build. But interesting news there tonight. Obviously, Sarah Louise in the chat has mentioned Reclaim Ireland has joined up with the IFP. That's very interesting news, and we can talk about that on another stream. But I mean, parties like that are going to team up together. That's got to be for the good, you know. Well, do you have any knowledge of Reclaim Ireland, Joshua? I know, Shane, you got your Irish Freedom Party shirt on there, but any knowledge of them, Joshua, yourself
on the
Reclaim Ireland?
Well, I suppose I did interviews with one of their members, if that kind of helped anything.
Right. Well, I know they're pretty on board with the likes of the IFP, you know. But I mean, it's all the good. I mean, a small party can only go so far and do so much if you pool resources.
I
Well,
know they have a huge Telegram chat, so they could like get members from. I think they have like 6,000 people in their Telegram group chat itself, so they could get members from that group chat.
yeah.
And about the Swedish elections, I was more happy to hear about the Swedish elections because they're more closer to us, and I did like an interview with someone who would be more close to the Swedish Democrats
Right.
or whatever party that was elected in.
Yeah, all I know from Sweden is that you see the scenes from it, and it's turning into a
It's crazy,
complete.
and the riots and the burning of flags, and it's just
Yeah,
you can see what you're dealing with.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
Then
I
you
mean, I
see,
saw.
then you see refugees or immigrants getting statues of Hail Mary and smashing it on the ground.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
how
yeah.
they care about our culture.
Oh, exactly. Yeah,
Couldn't
not
have been
much
Islam.
respect.
No, that's a religion of peace, Joshua.
And
They wouldn't have done anything like that.
you see the camps in France. I don't understand how France, the ones boarding the illegal boats to come over to Dover, I don't understand why the French can't just arrest them all and try and crack these illegal gangs. Why can't they? Is it not vagrancy? Can they do something about it? The French, to me, are sitting on their hands doing nothing. It's just a punishment to to the UK for leaving the EU. But half them people, they're saying, "Oh, we have family in Britain," and they were asked, "Well, what family do you have?" And they, "Oh, my brother." The joke. You just know darn well that
brothers.
they're lying. And they're just they're not being challenged or not. They're just let into the country. And then half of them now are coming to, even Micheál Martin said a lot of them are coming to Ireland because of the Rwanda policy, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
I mean, a lot of those guys. I think there was a program. I think it made it onto RT News. Was one of the few about immigrants, and a lot of the guys interviewed actually had British accents. They had been so long in the UK as
yeah,
immigrants there that they picked up the accent, and
yeah,
one of them even said he was working on the black market. That was what his employment was.
yeah,
So that's what we're getting.
yeah. Well, I mean, again, you don't mind quality immigrants, but what's happening now is just a free for all, you know.
Well, that's it. I think it's an irresponsible. It's back to government policy and uncontrolled liberalism, as I said.
Yeah,
They just. I mean, I think there's an agenda there where they want a lot of cheap labour into the country to support large corporate businesses paying low wages, and they don't care how they get it,
yeah.
and they don't care about the consequences because they feel that they're immune to any kind of political backlash. Because there's no right wing party in government at the moment. They're all either left or centre left or far left.
Well, and certainly in
There's no-
Ireland, yeah.
Yeah, there's
But
no
it is
balance.
interesting there in the chat. Sir Louise is talking about the new Italian Prime Minister. It's throwing the left, as I say, into a bit of a meltdown because she's a woman, you see, and not all women are card carrying feminazis. There are a lot of women that are very into the left. Even Liz Truss, I'm beginning to have doubts about how good she's going to be, but the fact that she's a woman means that they can't label her as sexist. Blah, blah. You know, so it's a great victory for the centre right, having the Maloney having her win that election.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's very personal. She looks good, so people will vote for. People will say, and that brings people over to your side as well. You know.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, because you can show an example of how something policies how they might work. You know, you can show an example of what people had previously been calling far right and fascist and actually might work for a country. It's not that at all. It's centre right. You know, the left are gone so far to the left that they make everyone else look far right.
I mean, some of the people
Prove them
at that point, everything's going so far to the far left.
Yeah.
Anybody tiny bit to the right of that's far right. You know?
I mean, about the Italian Prime Minister, you also have the Hungarian leader too.
The Orban, yeah.
Yeah, he's apparently on our side, and you have. I heard something is happening in Poland too, which is a win for our side.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's definitely the skittle effects happening. I mean, it's happening more from the eastern part of the EU, as it were.
Yeah.
The ones in the west are getting a bit. They're too lefty liberal, you know.
That's it.
So
Well, I think
I sadly think Ireland could be one of the last ones to move over. But
well, that's
It
it. We're
will.
the furthest west, I suppose, and the countries furthest to the east know the long-term harmful effects of
yeah,
communism
yeah,
and that sort of thing. So they're wary of it.
yeah. But I mean, it's exciting to see that there, and there's hope for us yet. It's just that we have a lot of work to do. Italy has a lot of work to do, but with a bit of a fair wind, maybe we'll get where we need to go. But we're going to have to.
That's it. And that news there, but the Reclaim Ireland group is just welcome news, and it would be great to see if the majority of the, I suppose, centre right wing groups could get together and form some kind of a consensus, I suppose. I know they're not going to unite.
Even an electoral pact would be
exactly,
possible.
because the appetite is growing. It's there for it. I think I saw an interesting quote about Sinn Féin are kind of a party that have abandoned a lot of their I suppose their supporters. So the party.
Well,
I mean,
themselves
wasn't Sinn Féin pro-Irish at one time? Like, weren't they against abortions and mass immigration and all for sovereignty at one point before?
Yes, of course.
I
they
think
were,
it
yeah.
was Jerry Adams that destroyed it. Like, Sinn Féin is MI5. They were infiltrated by MI5, like, since today they were created by Arthur Griffith.
But they used to be very anti-EU. If you read their literature
Yeah.
from 20 years ago, it could have been written by Nigel Farage. It was so anti-EU, No, they've ditched absolutely everything, No, the party, somebody's asking, the party that Maloney is Brothers for Italy, which is actually not as far as to the right as your man's, what do you call your guy? His party is more anti-immigrant.
Okay.
What do you call your man?
Is it Berlusconi, was it?
Yeah. Berlusconi.
I think that's his name, yeah.
Yeah. He's more sort of to the right. So she's actually sort of, Fratelli d'Italia. So she can come, and she's not as, your man and, what do you call the other guy who was in before, previous minister, the Italian guy.
I knew you would have been asked that. I would have done my homework better there.
I know, I should
Italian
have.
Prime Minister.
Silvio Berlusconi. No, Berlusconi, yeah. No, but the other guy with the beard, Berlusconi, yes, he was supposed to be sympathetic to Putin a wee bit, and he's very anti-NATO, as this other guy is. His name escapes me here. But apparently, your woman Maloney is not just as far to the right, if you want to use that clumsy word.
It was interesting as well, the Irish Women's Council, they were called out for what they really were.
Your party. Sorry, go on ahead.
Yeah, so the Irish Women's Council were called out for what they really were when they failed to congratulate the first Italian female Prime Minister. Instead, the Irish Women's Council.
Oh, right.
Yeah, they failed to acknowledge the success of the first Irish or first.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, so that it just showed themselves their true colours and what they really are.
Oh,
People see
they
that.
They don't give a fiddlers about women, really.
No.
Yeah, Salvini is your man's name. Salvini's the other guy. He's in the party. I think it's Forza Italia. So he's the guy who's teaming up. It's a three-party coalition, and there's pictures of him with Herman. So they're friendly. But apparently he's more anti-immigrant than even Maloney is. And then, of course, Silvio Berlusconi, he's an old stager. He was in before, and he's quite anti-NATO. But your woman is a good face for the whole thing. She's a good figurehead, and she'll come across very well.
Yeah, and that was one to watch. All right, definitely.
Yeah. Well, listen, guys, that's been a very good. I mean, it's food for thought. We can have another chat again about that. Very interesting times. Sorry about the ditch at the start of it there again. Thanks for coming on, Joshua. We've returned the favour. I did a wee chat on your stream, of course, and then you've come on here. So
yeah.
Mila Buichas has chat this chat. Agus Dahin Shane as well.
Okay.
And somebody's saying better Maloney. Is that Nora? Better Maloney than Salvini? Probably, yeah. And thanks to all our viewers that are watching. Gramila Mayagav. I know it's a bit short and sweet, but try to keep it to about the sort of 40 minutes. 35, 40 minutes. All right, guys, we'll chat again. Plenty of stuff to talk. Slán Awalya. Slán a
Thanks very much.
Cheers. Good Jane Keir. Thanks, Joshua. Thanks, Shane.